What's up, Banter fam? Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is an absolutely massive one. We have the CEO of Fantom, Michael Kong, coming on to talk about the future of Fantom and break down exactly what happened over the past couple months with Fantom and the Fantom price. It's going to be a massive show. It's not one you want to miss out on. Let's get straight into it. So before we bring Michael on, I just want to talk about for a few minutes what happened to Fantom and also go through some of the metrics which I'm using to justify the current Fantom price. So we'll talk about that for a few minutes, set the scene a little bit, see what is happening on chain, and then obviously we'll kick it off with Michael and ask some of the burning questions that you guys have to do with the Fantom ecosystem. So obviously we have seen a major drawdown in the Fantom price alongside the rest of the ecosystem. We've seen a minus 65% drawdown from all-time highs on Fantom. I just want to reiterate though, this isn't a Fantom exclusive issue in terms of the dump that we've seen. Multiple other projects like Solana and AVAX are also down 50+% over this period. However, obviously this dip was exacerbated by the Andre news that came around. The Bitcoin price is obviously dictating what these altcoins are doing right now. So having macro uncertainty in relation to Bitcoin is affecting these altcoins. So it's a nasty looking dip, but today we'll be talking about what is in store for the future of Fantom to look at how we can potentially not only crawl out of this dip, but what is happening in the ecosystem to cement Fantom as a future top L1. Obviously, when Andre did make this announcement, Fantom fell from around $1.70 down to $1.04 at its lows. So the Andre announcement was Anton coming out and tweeting that he was going to be terminating 25 projects. There was a bit of a miscommunication here. Some of the wording was not great on this tweet, and obviously that has resulted in a lot of panic in the community. So we saw a further drawdown already from the 170 region down to $1.04, but we have seen a little bit of strength come back in with the price action back up to $1.20 with this latest Bitcoin rally after the FOMC meeting. So it's good to see some nice support coming in around $1. If we look at the charts zoomed out a little bit, we can see that $1 has been a previous point of support and resistance for Fantom. So hopefully we can hold on to that level going forward. But let's have a look at what's actually happening now that Andre announced that he was terminating these projects. That Anton tweet, obviously the word terminating sounds quite scary. However, what is really happening with these projects is they are simply being handed over to the respective developers working on these projects. And we can see that with the Solidly exchange, the domain has been now handed over to the SolidX team. I have an interesting point in regards to this though, because Andre himself came out and released an article about a month before Solidly and said that immutability is the future. Obviously, smart contracts are immutable, which means they're not reliant on one single person to exhibit success. So if Andre dies today, as he said in his own words, all his code he wrote in DeFi will keep working exactly as designed. It does not need me. I find it kind of ironic that he comes out and promotes this article before Solidly and then leaves, and then the price dumps, even though he said it himself. The whole point of smart contracts and immutability is to ensure long-term success and remove the element of one person having control over prices in crypto. So the Solidly exchange is being migrated. But I also want to just reiterate this point. Community is what drives crypto. Community is one of, if not the most successful drivers of crypto and crypto prices in this market. And I've always said that a strong community is a vital aspect of a successful project. When we look at Fantom, I can wholeheartedly say it is one of the strongest communities, if not the strongest in crypto. And that's one of the reasons why I am a big believer in Fantom long term. Communities aren't built overnight. And a lot of projects have amazing tech, but they struggle to build that sense of cohesion. I think Fantom has done a really good job of doing that. So even though the recent FUD has been hard to take as a Fantom supporter, at the same time, I've enjoyed seeing the community rally behind Fantom at the moment. And we do see the metrics backing this up. So I want to go through a couple metrics which show this. And Fantom, once again, it was number one ranked altcoin on Lunar Crush 2 days ago. And the social volume has still been exploding. Obviously, if you do get a major price dip, you're going to get increased social data for a particular protocol. However, the Fantom Lunar Crush statistics have been very consistent for a long time. And it's been consistently one of the most talked about L1s and consistently one of the most engaged with L1s both on social media and across the network. So let's look at the network at the moment as well, because the daily transactions are also backing this up. We have seen a slight decline as some of the liquidity exited the chain after Solidly. Obviously, there was a lot of panic. The TVL in Solidly did drop around 70% after this announcement, but we're still seeing transactions on Fantom stay relatively high. So it's still one of the most transacted on chains in crypto. I believe at today's volume of 900K, it's still above Avalanche for daily transactions, and it's close to Ethereum. So it's definitely in the upper echelon if we consider transactions as a metric to verify how much a chain is being used. So whenever I'm valuing a chain, I always want to look at how much is actually being used, and the transaction volume is one way we can do this. The unique addresses aren't slowing down either. So a lot of people would assume after a lot of this FUD, no one wants to be on Fantom. That was kind of this weird narrative going around on Twitter, but this is just not the case at all, because 15,000 new addresses for the day is one of the highest we've seen in a long, long time. If we go back to October, during the Fantom Developer Conference, when Fantom was at all-time highs of 348, the total addresses were increasing by 5, 6, 7,000 a day. And even in the height of the conference here, the addresses were still only roughly 7 to 8,000 increasing a day. Now, even after all this hype has kind of died down a little bit to do with Solidly, the daily increase is still 12 to 15,000 addresses per day. So this indicates to me that the network effect for Fantom is still taking shape. It's still kicking off because Fantom is one of the best chains to execute in terms of DeFi, and multiple people still want to get involved, and we're still seeing new addresses come in. And now we've got 2.5 million total distinct addresses on the Fantom chain. So I think it's really important to have a step back and look at some of those metrics to kind of frame where we are in terms of a community, in terms of the statistics on Fantom, and also just kind of put ourselves in a position to be able to monitor these statistics, because there's a lot of FUD, and we have to kind of try and separate that from what is actually happening on chain. And what's actually happening is explosive continued growth, and we've seen that across Fantom. In a second, I'm going to bring on Michael Kong, the CEO of Fantom, to have a chat about the future of Fantom. He will have all the answers to do with what is actually happening behind the scenes at Fantom. We know that development is a major push of growth in crypto, and we want to see what is actually being developed behind the scenes. And also, I want to get his take on the Andre situation, because obviously it's big news, and he has some good insight with that as well. So it's going to be a massive show. Absolutely smash the like button, guys, for Michael Kong, who I'm just about to bring on, because I think there is some really valuable information we can dissect here. And yeah, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation right now. So smash the like button for this interview. Let's get straight into it. Michael, very nice to have you on the stream. We might need to unmute you here, though. All good.
Yeah, thanks so much, Miles, for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Obviously, it's been a pretty hectic few weeks with Fantom. There's been a lot of kind of FUD going around. I guess I wanted to just kick this off and start by asking you about Andre's role. I think it's important to contextualize how important Andre was to Fantom. So we know Andre was an advisor and a crucial part of Fantom early on, especially in the early stages. So I wanted to ask you, could you clarify what was Andre's role at Fantom, and how do you think him leaving affects Fantom going forward?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so Andre was involved with Fantom from the very early days. So Fantom used to be this Korean project that was run by Koreans that launched an ICO, one of the most popular ICOs in early to mid 2018, towards the tail end of the ICO boom of 17, 18. And it managed to raise a bit over $40 million. And then it turned out that the people that were running it at the time, made a lot of promises about ABFT technology, and that they had what they called simulation code, and basically had a testnet running. And so that was very attractive to us. And that was very interesting. When you looked at the background, they had a lot of credentials when it came to IT, professors, postdocs, and I was like, well, I'm just a mere bachelor. And I didn't really study distributed computing at university. I studied more smart contract execution, I guess what you call middleware stuff, EVM stuff. And so, we thought that they had something, and then it turned out that they didn't. So, I was prepared to quit at that point, but Andre convinced me to stay on and said, no, we can make something good out of this. I have, a background in distributed computing. I've done a lot of research into asynchronous processing of transactions. Let's try and sort this out and try and build a new team. So we managed to build a new team, and some of the developers we have on the team right now are some of the original developers going back years, right? And so we got a little bit lucky in terms of, our hires, getting the right people on the board who really did understand distributed computing. And so worked with Andre and myself to kind of like figure out, okay, how do we actually fulfill the original vision of being able to process transactions basically simultaneously rather than just like one at a time or one block at a time, which is what makes Fantom different, say, from Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so he was very pivotal in the early stages. He wrote some of the like earlier code as well, but he stopped getting involved in the core consensus side of things once we had the team up and running, early 2019. So it's been almost 3 years since like Andre last contributed to the code base. And there are a lot of myths going around, since Anton's tweet came out that, Andre was, what are you going to do now with your core development? Because now Andre, your core developer, has left. What are you guys going to do? You're screwed, right? And he's like, no. Andre hasn't been doing core development on Fantom for almost 3 years. And so if you go to Go-Opera, which is our a code base, which is open source, where you can see all of the commits for the underlying code that runs the Fantom technology, you scroll through the list of commits, page after page after page, thousands of commits, and you will not see Andre's name appear there until you scroll past many pages back into like 2019. And that's because the team that we have right now they're the ones that built the original technology, and they're the ones that are continuing to make improvements to the existing technology. So, if people love the technology that Fantom has built so far, that where it always stays online, it processes transactions quite fast, it processes transactions with lower fees than say on Ethereum or even against like other ones that are out there, then these are the same guys with an expanded team that are going to be building the technology going forward as well. So Andre was an advisor. He connected us to a variety of different projects in the space because obviously he's well connected. He gave us advice from time to time about our strategy, about how we were approaching, certain technical problems, about how we were approaching business problems. That was the extent of it. So operationally, like everything within the foundation is 100% as it was before.
Yeah,
And
I think that's that's really important to note. Like, I don't think anything has really changed in terms of the operation of your development. And also, as you said, he hadn't been on for quite a long time, but he was obviously a crucial advisor. But I think we need to go into kind of how all this kind of went down. So could you just walk me through like what happened with the Anton tweet and obviously the foundation's response to that tweet when he came out and said he was going to be terminating those projects?
Yeah, so like Andre publicly, people knew that something was going on when Andre a couple of weeks ago like turned off his Twitter, right? And he didn't like tell me about it in advance or other people about it in advance, to my knowledge. He just turned off his Twitter, and I kind of had a conversation as to like what was happening, and I'm not going to go into all the details about it, but I understand like why he did it, right? There are actually some good reasons behind it, which are kind of private. So I won't go into that. But then he basically told people publicly in the Keeper channel that he was handing things over, because people asked him, "Oh, are you still going to be involved in Keeper?" And he said, "Not from the 3rd of April. From now till the 3rd of April, I'm going to be handing things over in terms of like the UI and what control I have to the existing Keeper team, and then my role will be over." Right? So he didn't say, "Oh, the team's terminating," or "I'm terminating Keeper," or "I'm terminating any project." He didn't use that language at all. He said, "I'm handing it over." And but then when the Anton tweet happened, that nobody was really aware about, he just went on by himself and did it. I don't think he was malicious. I think he just like miswrote what he wrote in the tweet. And instead of writing saying, we are ending our involvement in 25 projects and we're handing things over, he said, we are terminating 25 projects and here's some of the projects listed. And I think that caused a lot of problems, because if you know these projects, right? If you know the teams behind them, or if you know like the Fantom Foundation, the people in there, or like the Fantom community, or you're developing the community, that somebody can't just like flick a switch and then turn off the network, right? Or turn off any of these protocols. But I think people who are not like super aware of like Fantom and the Fantom ecosystem were super aware about these other 24, 25 projects that they were talking about, might kind of get the impression that Andre and Anton basically had the keys to 25 projects and they were just going to go around and turn them off. So like literally at 3 a.m. my time, I had people messaging me saying, "Oh my gosh, like is Fantom closing? Like is Fantom shutting down?" I said, "No, that doesn't make sense at all. Why are you saying this?" And I looked at the tweet and I understood why some people were saying that. And so, the Fantom Foundation within 2 hours had to put out like an official tweet thread, which is still live, and basically just go through all the details as to like what the facts are, right? As to like who has been building the underlying technology, about the community, about some of the misconceptions about some of the other projects that have been running, for example, like multi-chain AnySwap. I personally know the team. They've been working on the technology for years. Andre has been an advisor on them, but Andre wasn't the one who built the technology, right? He helped early on, but he didn't continue developing on it, right? And he doesn't have some magic key to switch off all the validators and switch off the entire network and leave billions of dollars stranded on chain. He just doesn't. And so I think there are a lot of these myths that are built up about Andre that, Andre is definitely a very smart individual. He's very, very talented, extremely intelligent, and extremely well-spoken. But I think, people have sort of built like a cult of personality around him, which I can tell you he doesn't really like. And, is a cult of like, Andre, DeFi God, he's some sort of like messiah. He can like build everything, he can build the Tower of Babel in like one day or whatever. And a lot of that stuff is just like simply not true, because nobody can run 25 projects simultaneously. So I think people need to realize, what the reality is, as opposed to like the myths, and understand, exactly that the Fantom Foundation consists of almost 50 people now. A lot of these people are developers. More than half of them are developers. They're working on the core technology. They're working on the middleware technology. And some of the developers that we have on the team right now were the ones from very early on. So they're the ones that have built the entire technology stack, all the consensus, integrating with the EVM, the smart contract engine. And, in terms of community, you see like a ton of like hundreds of applications being used. You see, for example, SpookySwap, one of the most popular dexes in the world, only runs on Fantom. These are all projects that work independently from Andre. And as people can probably like tell, if you go on Fantom right now, there's no change to any of these protocols.
Well, that's the thing I think with crypto. People love to band behind a leader. It's one of the big narratives which drives projects forward, because it's a highly speculative industry. That's just the reality of the industry we're in. So if you look at some of the other chains, like Bitcoin has Satoshi, Ethereum has Vitalik, Luna has Do Kwon, Fantom, I guess, had Andre, and he was kind of that guy. In the future, who do you think that guy is going forward for Fantom? Are you someone that could step into a role like that?
I think there is generally like a tendency for people, to follow like particular figures or follow like certain like quote unquote like leaders. And I don't think it's just like a crypto thing. I think it's just a human psychology thing. People want to look up to certain people and pay attention to them and get their guidance from them and really like kind of like follow them, right? Because they think that they can follow those people to success, to victory, to glory, that sort of thing. We've seen that sort of human psychology, not just in crypto, but just in general, like around the world. It's just like a human thing. It's just like part of human nature. I think for Fantom, going forward, I think it will be like, key community members that people I think will kind of like look up to, right? And, maybe myself, part of it as being CEO of the Fantom Foundation, maybe a few other like developers on board who are really, really good as well. But I don't think it's very healthy for everybody to kind of gravitate around like one individual, right? Because it's kind of like human risk, right? Because what happens if that, one individual falls ill or, something bad happens, that shouldn't be the catalyst that brings down a whole project. And for a project like Fantom that has grown almost entirely organically, it doesn't make sense that, one project or one person in the community or one individual, should bring down the whole chain. Because I kind of see Fantom as like kind of like the early days of the internet, right? It's just this like open source, decentralized, permissionless technology that anybody can connect to, anybody can build applications on there, good or bad. And it's just this open source technology that anyone can use. And I think that's a very important part of the culture. Yeah.
Did the hype maybe worry you? Because obviously you guys came in with this kind of open source mentality. You were obviously building a team from the early days working on this technology, and it kind of grew very organically without a massive marketing push. Did kind of having this, and I'm sure you would have saw it occurring in January, was all the hype surrounding Solidly and kind of everyone looking up to Andre, was that something that worried you as a key member of Fantom?
Well, it's both kind of like good and bad. Like it's very good, in the sense that it's helped generate like attention and like hype for the Fantom chain. So people can go into the chain and not just there, to use like Solidly, but they're kind of like Solidly is kind of like the gateway for them to kind of experience the rest of the Fantom ecosystem and be like, oh wow, you can do all sorts of like interact with all sorts of DeFi applications, interact with all sorts of like NFT based applications, that sort of thing, and really like bring them into the community. That being said, there's always a risk that, with a single project that kind of like brings a lot of attention onto the chain, that like, putting aside like Andre's announcement about like, probably leaving, if there's a bug in the contract, if something goes wrong and, people lose money in particular, that's something that's also like quite bad. But kind of like the position of the foundation is like, we want to be kind of like neutral as to like applications on the chain, right? We don't want to be like picking winners and losers. We don't want to be there publicly saying like, people in the community should behave this way and not that way and that sort of thing. Because kind of our philosophy about it is kind of like building kind of like how the internet was like built, right? So just having this like technology that's out there, try and grow and develop the ecosystem as much as possible. We're not trying to be like an activist when it comes to projects and tell people how they should or shouldn't behave, right?
I agree.
So
I wanted to just say, everyone in the comments is saying how we're Aussie. Everyone's saying Aussie. So we're two. We're both Australian. I'm from Melbourne. Michael's from Sydney. So yeah, we are Australian. I just wanted to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, and I wanted to get your opinion on this because this is quite a large topic in the Fantom ecosystem amongst the community. So just taking a website like DeFi Llama, if we go through and we look at the metrics, we can obviously see, and it's kind of zoomed in here, but we can see that Fantom has a very high TVL compared to its market cap. And it's one of the lowest in crypto, a 0.47 market cap to TVL versus like an AVAX 1.8, Solana 4. There are a few reasons why I think this is the case, but I wanted to ask you, why do you think the market is pricing Fantom so low in terms of market cap TVL? And do you think this is maybe because markets simply don't price the DAG model the same as they would like a blockchain with subnets? What are your reasons for this discrepancy, in your opinion?
I think it's a couple of things. One thing which is like kind of a big historical is that the projects like Solana and Avex and a couple of others, they kind of like began roughly around the same time that like Fantom began, right? So like 17, 18. But those projects didn't have, I guess, as much problems from the beginning as like Fantom did, right? With all the internal stuff that went on and all of like the problems with, people promising stuff that didn't exist and that sort of thing. So I always, kind of thought that like Fantom lost a lot of momentum after the ICO, and we kind of had to rebuild from scratch. I kind of have told people, like, using an analogy, the sort of momentum that Fantom got as a project during the ICO was like we were like close to the summit of Everest in terms of like momentum and hype and traction. And then because of all the internal crap, we basically like fell off a cliff and went right back to base camp. And so we had to build up the momentum and then hype and the traction all over again. And so, had the original developers actually promised, had actually delivered on what they promised, had they actually had a testnet, had they actually had some sort of asynchronous technology that was out there, we would have continued to be able to run with it and run with the momentum. And I think Fantom would be a lot larger than what it is right now. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, even though Fantom isn't as big, at least in terms of market cap, like Solana and Avalanche, it still is quite big, right? As a project. And it still has like a very sizable community. And we obviously have quite a reasonably good technology as like a baseline that we can continue to improve on. But a lot of time was wasted, I think, on the early days, and a lot of the momentum was wasted. And Solana and Avalanche around the same time, also had like a lot of traction, and they were able to keep running with it. That's one reason. The other reason is that those other chains have had tremendous VC backing from the beginning, and they still do. Fantom, because of the way it started, it actually had quite a lot of VC backing. And then a lot of people exited the position because they thought that it was a scam. And in the early days of Fantom, it totally was a scam. I got scammed and other people got scammed. But, we basically had to undo the scam and actually like make it into a legitimate project by actually delivering on the technology. And that's what we were able to do, on the 27th of December, 2019, when the first mainnet release was launched. But honestly, it should have actually happened a year earlier. It really should have happened on the 27th of December, 2018. And had we had that extra year of growth, we would be a lot bigger than we are right now. And so
do you think
really
maybe
two reasons, my opinion.
Do you think maybe Fantom is essentially a year behind some of these other chains because of that?
Yes, I've always thought about it that way. Now the gap is narrowing over time, which is great, but we're still behind and in time where we should have been. Yeah, I've always considered Fantom had a lost year.
So do you think?
And that
Well,
sounds
obviously,
very critical, but I know exactly what happened in the early days. I know all of the details, and I can tell you that's absolutely true. And it's sad to say, but it's true. However, on the plus side, we have come a long way. You know, a lot of projects in 2017, 18 that did ICOs, you know, they kind of like crashed and burned. They failed. You know, nobody like heard about them. A lot of people wrote Fantom off, but we kind of came back. And it's quite rare for a project to be able to come back like the way we've done, and we have. So on the positive side, we have grown tremendously, and we can continue to grow because we have that strong like base right now of community, of the technology, and we kind of know what technology problems we need to solve.
So let's contextualize some of that stuff to do with technology, because when I look at chains like AVAX, they obviously have their subnets. You know, you've got Cosmos, which has obviously a very interoperable ecosystem with Cosmos SDK. Fantom's obviously a DAG, so it operates slightly differently. So in your opinion, does Fantom have a technological advantage over other chains, and what are the disadvantages as well compared to something like an AVAX?
Yeah, we definitely do have a lot of technology advantages. Excuse me. So first of all, like what the developers have built is a network that processes transaction asynchronously. And so let me break down what I mean by asynchronously. It means that when transactions enter the network, they don't get processed sequentially, or in other words, one at a time. So for example, on Ethereum or Bitcoin, you know, blocks get mined one at a time. There are transactions in the blocks. However, for Fantom, it's completely different. There are multiple blocks that get processed simultaneously across the validators or the node set in the network, and you need just over 2/3 of the total validating power of the network. It's entirely proof of stake based in order to achieve finality for your block. And you only need one block to achieve finality. You don't need multiple blocks afterwards, because we say that finality or confirming transactions is deterministic. In other words, it's done with complete certainty. It's not done based on the longest chain rule or probabilistic consensus. And so the big challenge is, you know, when you're processing transactions asynchronously, because you don't have a particular order in which they come in, you have to figure out how do you get the final order in transactions, because transactions have to be consistent across all nodes, as you know, right? It's like one of the key properties of blockchains, right? There can't be a single inconsistency. It can't be 99.9% correct or 99.99% correct. It has to be exactly 100%. So the challenge is, how do you get the ordering of transactions that happen at random points in time? And how do you do that where it's fault tolerant? So if a node or 2 or 3 nodes goes down, it has no impact on consensus. And how do you do it in like the fastest possible manner? So what the developers have done is that it's kind of like achieved all those sorts of aims. So, you know, with the Fantom chain basically never goes offline. The only time it ever went offline for about 12 hours was in February 2021, because there was a very strange edge case with the consensus. We fixed that. And since then, there's been absolutely zero downtime at all. And you can't necessarily say that about some of the other like L1s and L2s that are out there. They've had a lot more downtime than Fantom. Fantom basically never goes down now because it takes a lot to bring down the network. So that's one advantage, network stability. The other advantage is that we can process transactions quite fast. And so if you compare ourselves to kind of like Avalanche, right? When we do the same number of transactions as Avalanche, especially the more complicated like smart contract transactions, you know, their transaction fees are like significantly higher than ours. They're like 50, 100, sometimes 200 or even 300% higher than what Fantom's is. That means that at this point in time, we are more scalable on a transaction-to-transaction basis. And so being able to process these transactions asynchronously gives us a big advantage. That being said, there's still a lot of limitations with the technology. There's still the blockchain trilemma. So we haven't completely solved scalability. You know, you can't run 1 million applications on Fantom right now. Processing smart contracts is very slow for all EVM-based chains. So there's a lot of work done being there that I can talk about, I guess. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, I guess that leads us into the next question, which is like, obviously FVM, something you've been working on for quite a while. It'll be a major milestone. I know it's a big work in progress. It's a big undertaking, which is basically the big middleware upgrade for Fantom. Could you kind of break down for the community what FVM is and how it will kind of help and assist in that path to scalability? Because a lot of people won't know what it does.
Yeah, so when smart contracts gets executed, say on Ethereum or Fantom or a number of other chains, they run on top of a software layer called the middleware, and the middleware basically is this layer that sits between the developers and the applications. So like the web applications, the mobile applications that connect to the chain, and the underlying chain itself, which processes transactions and confirm transactions. And so the middleware is basically the technology that allows smart contracts to run. So they basically like crunch like the code that comes in. They process it in a way that allows the nodes to actually like understand what the transaction is, and basically allows them to like execute the transactions and talk to the underlying chain. And so with this middleware stack that most people use, we just call it like the Ethereum virtual machine or the EVM. This is technology that kind of goes back to like 2014, 2015 when Ethereum first launched. And the real innovation about Ethereum is that it was the first smart contract platform out there. So smart contracts allow you to do all sorts of things on chain, DeFi applications, NFT applications, and this is the sort of technology that's simply not available on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has chosen to go in a different direction, which is really to focus on payments and store value, as opposed to being able to run like P2P applications on it. So with the middleware, we've done a lot of research, academic research at the University of Sydney, and also with a few people from Yonsei University, which is this Korean technical university. And we've been working with people, professors in the programming languages field that kind of specialize in this middleware or specialize in understanding how smart contracts executed. And in fact, my old professor has been doing research in this area. I did some research with him all the way back in like 2016 in the early days. And so what we've kind of identified is a lot of inefficiencies with how these smart contracts are executed. So what we want to do is to be able to like replace the technology that Ethereum has with our own custom technology, which kind of solves a lot of these scalability problems and also security problems. So just to kind of like illustrate at a high level when it comes to security, when you write a smart contract, you've got all these like proofs and safe checks and safe math and all those things at the solidity level. But when you actually run on the virtual machine itself, the middleware doesn't actually tell you or prove correctness on the programming language. I.e., it doesn't give you any feedback if your smart contract is secure or not. What we want to do is create a smart contract technology that tells you with mathematical certainty or degree of mathematical certainty whether you have particular bugs in your smart contracts or not. And that's very, very difficult work that's led down the track. The more immediate work is the scalability work. So being able to get much better performance executing smart contracts, because we've done tests and it's the same sort of like limitations that apply to other EVM chains, where without the EVM, without the middleware stack, we can get literally 10 times the number of transactions per second on the network. So your EVM slows you down by about 90% or a bit over 90%. And so if you can reduce the gap of the inefficiencies tremendously, you can get massive speed ups in throughput. So I think what's important to understand here is that scalability of blockchains doesn't just come down to the consensus. It doesn't just come down to layer 1 or layer 2 technologies. What it also comes down to, if you're a smart contract chain like Fantom, is also other parts of the stack. For example, like the middleware, how these smart contracts are actually executed. So we want to replace, for example, like how reads and writes work from the middleware stack to the chain. We've found ways to kind of make that a lot more efficient using particular data structures. And there are also a lot of efficiency gains you can make by modifying the client, by modifying the virtual machine, by replacing the virtual machine with a different type of virtual machine. So there are just like a lot of gains that you can make there that will have a tremendous impact on when you want to execute smart contracts.
Yeah, no, that's a great response. I think essentially, just for the viewers that didn't understand, it's basically FVM will be essentially replacing EVM. Is kind of like the gist of that.
So we want to replace the EVM. Yeah. And I know that sounds quite ambitious, which it is, but I think we have the right team to do it. And we have some more announcements on more people joining the team that have specific knowledge, very strong academic, and also industry experience in how to actually build virtual machines and how to actually execute smart contracts. So
I know it's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
But when do you, I mean, I know you get this question all the time, but what's your prediction on like when FVM will be ready, roughly?
So there's actually a lot of components to the middleware in terms of scalability and security improvements. In terms of like a version of the virtual machine, sometime in 2023 is my aim. in terms of already getting gains in the middleware, that could come within a few months. So the first objective that our developers are working on, because we've already identified the problem and found the solution for it, is replacing how reads and writes are done from the virtual machine to the consensus, because that's really, really slow. So we found ways of using alternative data structures to dramatically improve the speed of execution of smart contracts, depending on how complex the transaction is. And for like the most complicated transactions, we at least in our testing being able to get like a 4 to 5 times performance on the execution of that smart contract. Now, I just want to preface that by saying, this was like in a test environment. This was like privately tested. How it behaves on the mainnet, you don't know until you actually deploy in the mainnet. But mathematically, and then the research we've done, it totally makes sense that performance improvement is there. So we want to push that to the main chain, just like we're pushing other improvements, to syncing of nodes, to the RPC nodes. And I think the user experience will just be a lot better than it has been for the past few months on Fantom.
No, I agree with that. I think there'll be major upgrades. I just see this guy here saying, "Miles, get some sun, mate." No offense. I'm in a studio right now. The lights are really, really white. So if we could get some more yellow lighting in here, that'd be great. Because you're making me look bad here, man. I'm looking looking very, very pale. But I kind of just wanted to ask you about like the state of the Fantom ecosystem. I know there's a lot of awesome changes coming to the technology, but a lot of our viewers are obviously very invested in these kind of smaller cap projects. Personally, I love what Beethoven's doing. I love Liquid Driver. I think it has really kind of cemented itself as the DeFi chain, so to speak. I just want to ask you, like, what are your favorite projects in the Fantom ecosystem? What springs to mind when it comes to the ecosystem, in your opinion?
So, we're seeing like tremendous growth on DeFi, which is exciting. I mean, you name some of the projects there, and a lot of these projects are very, very like high quality. They run really well. They haven't like had issues before. And so like, just to highlight one in particular, like SpookySwap. SpookySwap was one of the first like DeFi projects on Fantom, along with SpiritSwap. And these were like forks of Uniswap and SushiSwap, and they're like part of the reason why Fantom grew so quickly, and why Fantom is kind of like known as a DeFi chain, because they had great user experiences. People kind of like found them, played around with them, and were like, wow, you can actually do stuff on Fantom, right? And so that attracted more developers, attracted more users, and you kind of get the like network growth. And that's really, really exciting. So, if we've got like more projects with additional functionality on DeFi coming to the chain. I mean, just a few hours ago, I did like a Twitter space with Alpha Homora version 2. So Alpha Homora is this project that allows you to lend and borrow assets, but like leverage it on it and do a lot more functionality than just simply like a basic lending and borrowing protocol. So they've just deployed on Fantom as of today. Which is really exciting. So we're talking to other projects as well that are coming from Ethereum onto Fantom that will expand kind of like the DeFi functionality on the Fantom chain itself. So the things that are kind of like missing on Fantom compared to say Ethereum, they're coming to Fantom. And I think that's really critical to point out there, that, despite all that drama with like, with like Anton and, a lot of like, community upheaval, but like Andre like probably leaving and that sort of thing. We're seeing tremendous like growth, on the Fantom chain still, and we still see a lot of projects coming and deploying on Fantom. Like I've not heard a single project directly or indirectly by other people that have said, we're not deploying on Fantom now because Andre has left, right? Like not a single one. They're still continuing to deploy as planned, and we've seen that empirically. We got listed on a couple of exchanges, on eToro, on crypto.com, just in the past week. So, things are growing actually pretty well on the Fantom chain.
Yeah, and I think
despite all the drama.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, DeFi has really been the big driver of growth in Fantom. And this is kind of what I wanted to ask you now. So when I think of chains, obviously I think of a few major drivers of growth. For example, with Avalanche recently, we have seen a major DeFi ecosystem like Fantom, but we're now also seeing like the play to earn gaming side come into fruition. Like personally, I see gaming as a way to onboard new users in a new way, because obviously DeFi, it's great, but it doesn't appeal to some of the more retail audience, which I think could really use onboarding. And I think games like DeFi Kingdoms are helping do that, because they're essentially dexes, but they're retaining users because they're really interesting to use. They have that play to earn mechanic. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the Fantom gaming space? Because obviously there aren't many games currently on Fantom. Is that something you're working on, or at least trying to incentivize? Because we did see the AVAX incentive program come out recently for gaming.
Yeah, so we are starting to see some growth on gaming and on the NFT side of things with the Fantom chain. To be honest, like that sort of growth hasn't been as large as, say, like other L1s out there, and I think that's because like most people have kind of seen Fantom as being like a DeFi chain for a number of reasons. Like one, that's like how we like grew so fast at the beginning. Two, people wanted to like do DeFi on Fantom because they didn't want to pay the sort of fees that you're paying on Ethereum. And number three, of course, like, Andre being someone that's very much involved in DeFi, help draw a lot of attention to Fantom as kind of like a DeFi chain. But I think I just want to emphasize to people out there that Fantom isn't just like a DeFi chain, right? It's not a chain that's specifically created for DeFi. It's a generalized smart contract platform. And that means that all sorts of like P2P applications that you can build on Ethereum and other networks, you can build on Fantom and take advantage of exactly the same consensus that like DeFi takes advantage of, right?
What's the benefit for games to come on and build on Fantom? Because obviously on AVAX you've got the subnets, which means they can kind of operate more freely. If a game's deploying on Fantom, what's the incentive for them to deploy on Fantom over Solana and AVAX, who have taken most of the share of the pie?
So when you deploy an application on Fantom, you get the benefit of the whole security of the network, right? So one of the like disadvantages and one of the challenges with the subnets is, when you add subnets and you have to communicate between the subnets, it adds complexity, right? Which adds, the potential for like something to go wrong, which adds, potential like security issues. With Fantom, when you deploy an application on Fantom, it's pretty simple. You don't have to play around with many things. You can deploy on Fantom exactly in the same way as you deploy on Ethereum, and you take advantage of like the full security of the entire network. It's not just like part of the network. Like the benefits are like, faster, cheaper, secure transactions, via the asynchronous technology. And we've got a lot of technology upgrades coming out that will benefit, games deploying on Fantom. So for example, we've got like this upgrade that we call Snapsync, which gives you the same sort of outcome as like Ethereum Snapsync, which reduces on the testnet. It's reduced the data size of nodes by 90% and made things a lot faster to sync. So that means that we can increase the gas per second on the network, which means that we can have more network throughput. And so if you're an NFT project that has executes a lot of transactions, because you're doing a lot of like saves, right? A lot of persistent changes to persistent data, which is when you do the transactions with NFT games. The better the consensus, the cheaper it is, the more like advantageous it is to kind of like use that consensus, right? And so that's like what we offer people. We do have like a few games deploying on Fantom. So one of them is called Tank Wars, which like the foundation invested some money into in the seed round. We've got like a couple of metaverses. We've got like 8-bit metaverse. We've also got the space theme game called like Void Armada that's deploying on Fantom. So we do have like some games and some metaverses deploying on the Fantom. It still is kind of early days, to be honest, but we actually have seen quite a lot of growth in the past like month or two actually on NFTs. There've been like more NFT sales going on. There've been more NFTs being created. There've been like games starting to deploy on Fantom. And so we're also talking to a few projects like gaming guilds, people that kind of like are like support for the ecosystem, support for different projects where they offer like, for example, like creative options. They offer people they like produce like content, like Fantom branded content for like metaverse projects to use. So we've got like a whole ecosystem that's starting to develop, and I think that would start taking off a lot more in the coming months.
Because Fantom kind of grew as this community-driven project. Like, you guys didn't invest much in marketing. You obviously had the major incentives program initially, but you guys aren't like huge spenders. You don't have, as you said, you don't have the same VC backing as some of these other projects. So is gaming something you'll look to financially incentivize directly, or are you more aiming to incentivize it through upgrading the technology and growing organically?
Yeah, so we do have the incentives program there, and we're working on the incentives program to kind of like include like gaming and NFTs and metaverses as well, to kind of like help those grow. So there is like the financial aspect to that. But I think what's like really important to understand and what's really amazing about the Fantom community is that like almost like all of it has been grown like organically. So, we haven't like paid projects a lot of money to deploy in Fantom. We haven't had, done any of that. We haven't had to do like crazy sponsorships worth like millions and millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, even hundreds of millions of dollars nowadays. The number just seems to get bigger. You just seem to like add zeros to it, in order to attract users on chain. We've spent very, very little in terms of marketing and PR in comparison, and that's deliberate because the marketing and PR spend that we've done has been like kind of more strategic around like building a social media presence, getting placements, in PR on like traditional or non-traditional media or crypto media, and really just kind of like talking about like, hey guys, there's an interesting project that has found Fantom and deployed on Fantom, come and experience it for yourself and just come and interact with it. So, in terms of user acquisition, I guess from the foundation's point of view, it's been like very, very low cost in comparison, but it's exactly the position we want to be in. We want the growth to be organic. We want people to be able to find Fantom. We want the community to kind of spread organically by itself because, it's not top down, it shouldn't be the foundation that controls the whole network, controls like the block producers, controls like who can come into the network or not. We want it to be open source technology that anybody can use, anybody can connect to, and just kind of be like the internet, essentially. So that's kind of like what our philosophy has been.
No, I think that's a great philosophy to have. I mean, that's how it's grown. So like, it hasn't grown in the same way that other chains have. It hasn't had all the marketing spend that other chains have. But I guess so far it's worked. So I can't fault the approach there so far, that grassroots approach. I do have two more questions for you today. The first question is, you probably know a lot of our followers are investors in Tomb Finance. I think most people that first come into the Fantom DeFi ecosystem, they kind of look at Tomb as kind of like the pinnacle of DeFi in terms of Fantom. I know, like if you're on Twitter, a lot of people, it's always Tomb. Obviously, Harry's a major figurehead. I just wanted to see what your thoughts on Tomb Finance is.
Yeah, Tomb Finance is an interesting project because it's one of these like algorithmic stablecoin models we've kind of like seen in the past. I think with Tomb Finance, it can be sustainable in the way if it has like more utility. And I know like Harry and his team of developers, and he has a very, very smart team of developers actually. They're trying to figure out how to add as much utility in the long run to the Tomb token. I think it's going to be part of the new exchange that's coming out, which is called the Felix Exchange, which was probably announced to come out on Q2 2022. So I think if they can also modify the T-bond model to make it more attractive to buy T-bonds when it's below peg. I think the T-share model works pretty well. I think the T-bond model needs to work
because a lot of people right now are arbing. A lot of people are they'll buy Tomb, then they'll manually sell it instead of using the T-bond mechanism. So I think you're right. I don't think there's enough of an incentive necessarily to buy T-bonds over just buying Tomb and just selling it when it hits peg. I know a lot of people do that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, if they can do some modifications to the model, plus add more utility to it, then I think Tomb could be in a very strong position. So it's obviously like grown very big at the moment. So there is opportunity there to kind of like fix a few issues with the model. So if they can do that, I think it can actually work.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I know a lot of our community's invested. I'm invested in Tomb as well. A lot of people are invested in that. So it's still it's still been a big onboarding platform. Obviously, having Harry as the figurehead of that to onboard new users. One more question, and quite a broad question, but I'm interested to hear your opinion. It's in 5 years' time. Where do you see Fantom? What's your long-term vision for the chain? So in 5 years' time, where do you want Fantom to be, and what's your long-term overall vision for where Fantom's headed?
Yeah, so over like 5 years on the technology side, I want to be able to like horizontally scale. So that means that I want to be able to like kind of expand, allow the technology to be like scalable to like the level of like how the internet is, right? And so that could be like, for example, in the form of sharding, it could be in the form of like a few other mechanisms. But if we can get to that ability to horizontally scale, then we won't have those sort of limitations on gas. We won't have those sorts of like limitations with the blockchain trilemma that we do currently have at the moment. So that would like allow us to dramatically get a lot more users. So we can get like 50 to 100 times the amount of users we have now, 50 to 100 times the amount of applications we have right now. That would be ideal. And also in 5 years' time, if we can completely replace the existing smart contract execution stack that we have right now with our own Fantom virtual machine, with our own way of reading and writing of data, instead of using like the Geth client, use a different client to kind of like interact with applications like above the stack. If we can like solve a lot of these technical problems and also have the security of the virtual machine, as I mentioned before, giving feedback to users if there is a bug in the execution or not, then we'll have a lot more safer and smarter smart contracts out there, and they'll run a lot more efficiently than they do at the moment on all chains. So that's kind of like my long-term vision, or at least like 5-year vision. It may take a little bit longer than that, but I want the Fantom ecosystem to start growing, as big as the internet has been.
Wow, that's a big vision, and that's exactly what we want to hear as Fantom holders. Technology aside, what's your vision for some potential applications of the Fantom chain? Maybe this is blockchain in general as well. It's not exclusive to Fantom, but what kind of applications that we're not seeing right now? Obviously, we're mainly DeFi driven. Are you seeing, or you've got in your sights for 5 years' time with Fantom?
Yeah, so I kind of use case for blockchains that I actually kind of explored a few years earlier that I haven't really seen take off on chain, but I think is a $1 billion opportunity, is the whole idea about group-based insurance. So this is like peer-to-peer insurance where in the traditional model of insurance, you have like people who pay premiums to like a big organization. The big organization has big buildings and big expenses and lots of employees and that sort of thing. And then the people on the other side, who are also the payers of the insurance, the subset of those that like put in claims, right? And we see a lot of issues around one, like people taking advantage of the claiming process, because your incentive when you're claiming insurance is to claim for as much as you can kind of get away with. And we've seen that a lot in all sorts of kind of insurance. And the second problem with the model is that you have a lot of inefficiencies where you have these big intermediaries that have a lot of like expenses. And so if you can kind of like replace the middleman with peer-to-peer insurance, or replace the middleman with kind of like a smart contract where people are kind of like accountable to one another, where there's transparency on claims, where you could have like, for example, like jury selection of like particular participants in the pool that get paid to kind of like evaluate people's claims and render a verdict as like, okay, this claim is legitimate, that claim is not legitimate, then you kind of save the moral hazard of people overclaiming for insurance. And so if you stop people from overclaiming because people are more accountable to one another, you have like lower cost of premiums. You don't have all the overheads of a big insurance company. And so in the end, that means that you have premiums that are lower for everybody on average. And in fact, with some of the pooled funds that happen like in the smart contract, you can even like DeFi farm with that. You can even take it further. You can put that into like very safe stablecoin pools. And so people can actually earn money on the insurance. And so in some cases, if people are not claiming enough or not making that many claims, you may actually make money from insurance. It's actually possible. So I think that's a huge idea that we haven't seen in blockchain in general, but that's something that I would like people to explore. I know a few people that are exploring it, but that's something that I think that hasn't taken off as like DeFi has or NFTs have. But I think that's a big growth area. So in terms of
I agree.
Like, an area that like a lot of people are not talking about, this is an area that I'm quite bullish on myself.
So if we want exposure to this narrative, obviously it's very early in the scheme of like how big this could be. But if we wanted to get some exposure, learn a bit more about it, are there any projects right now that you think are good that are aiming to do this that we could research?
There've been like a few more like non-blockchain companies that try to do peer-to-peer insurance. Like one that comes to mind is this project called a few years ago they launched. They're called Lemonade, and I think they're US based and they're backed by like some big VCs like Sequoia and others. There've been like a few others in a few different countries. I mean, there was like one that was starting to get pretty big in Germany, but none of them have like really taken off. And I haven't seen any like blockchain based like insurance ones like actually launched. And when I mean insurance, I don't mean like insurance for like DeFi. I mean like more general insurance. So replacing, your insurance company that does like auto insurance or house insurance or home and contents insurance with like a pool of individuals where it's your friends and your family. And so you're incentivized not to kind of screw them over because you're transparent to them and they're transparent to you.
I think you have to hand in your notice of resignation, bro. I think you need to go and start an insurance company. What are you doing at Fantom? Like, it's a $1 billion idea right here.
Well, as some people like to say, yeah, I mean, this is a great idea, but it's not for me to develop. It's for somebody else to develop in the world, right?
Yeah. You're just putting it out there. Hopefully, well, I mean, I'm sure you're getting front run on the idea because it's a massive idea, and I think that's a really unique take. I think it's a unique space, and it could have some huge ramifications down the line. But I wanted to say thank you very much for coming on and chatting today. It was a very good discussion. We covered quite a lot of ground. I very much enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Michael's links are in the description to his Twitter. Go and follow him, obviously. And yeah, good luck with all the upgrades coming in the future. We'll be watching closely as Fantom fans and supporters. And any way that I can help as well, I'm happy to help.
Thanks, Miles. Like, really appreciate being on the show. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I will see you guys in the show on Sunday. Peace out. Hope you have a very nice day.